You're seeing the re-segregation of America. That's what critical race theory is all about. That's what Marxism more broadly is all about. We're at each other's throats. They want race wars. They want economic hardship and impoverishment. They want open borders to destroy assimilation in an American culture. This is what they want. They want mayhem, they want anarchy, they want power, they want control. And in order to do that, you have to destroy the status quo. Slavery was not the foundational element of this country. In fact, it wasn't even the foundational element of the South. 25% of Southerners owned slaves. They were wealthy Southerners, wealthy farmers, wealthy ranchers. A lot of them had cotton and so forth they were growing. The vast majority of people in the South couldn't afford to own slaves. They could barely afford to feed themselves. It was not the founding principle of the United States. Nowhere can they prove that. They point to 1619, where a ship came to the shores of the United States and it had 20 slaves brought here by the British. Those 20 slaves were not even considered as slaves back then. They were considered as indentured servants. Now, don't get me wrong. You don't want to be an indentured servant either. But those 20 slaves were not the basis for the founding of America in 1619. Period. And there was no promotion of slavery in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, in the Pennsylvania Assembly Building, during the debates over the Declaration of Independence, at all. The debate was over representative government. The debate was over taxation. And when the Declaration of Independence was drafted, you may have heard about the man by Thomas Jefferson, half a block away in a home where he was staying and where he wrote the first of several drafts of the Declaration of Independence. He had a line in there about the elimination of slavery. But South Carolina and Georgia, their delegates objected. So it was removed. They were trying to form a country based on unalienable rights. And when you read the Declaration, even without that phrase in it, that line in it, it doesn't talk about black or white. It doesn't talk about slavery. In fact, it talks about every human being having unalienable rights. And you might say, well, Mark, that's incongruent with what was taking place in the countries. Slavery was not widespread in the United States. It was bad enough that it was in the United States. Please don't get me wrong. But the fact of the matter is, you don't have to believe me. Believe Abraham Lincoln in his famous speech he gave in 1858. He's the one who said, our forefathers founded a nation. He turned to the Declaration of Independence, unalienable rights, natural law, God-given, above any human law, and that the enslavement, one man against the other, they knew it was wrong. But in founding a nation and fighting the British, they couldn't resolve it. It's not that they didn't want to, they couldn't. So, Lincoln said, they enshrined it in our founding document, the formal consensus document for the founding of the United States, that all men are created equal, that they have unalienable rights, the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. All men, created by God, that God's law supersedes any other law. And Lincoln pointed it out over and over again, but particularly in 1858, and he said they had to leave it to their progeny, to their children and their children's children to fix this. And they used the Declaration of Independence as the basis for it. Now, with all due respect to Angela Davis and all the critical race theory radicals in this country, they haven't done anything for black people. Abraham Lincoln is called the great emancipator for a reason, and he lost his life over it. Ulysses S. Grant, the a president who doesn't get the credit that he deserves, but more so now that people have looked back. He led the Civil War eventually for the North and defeated the South. He was abhorred by slavery. And he sent the army to the South as the Democrats, dressed up as Klansmen, were lynching and slaughtering black people for voting. And it was horrendous. And the torture that took place and the executions that took place, they were horrendous. Grant sent the army down there and all but destroyed the Ku Klux Klan, which was made up of mostly Confederate veterans and so forth, Democrats. Then what happened later, the next election, he won election, and they held the Senate, but they lost the House of Representatives because the economy had turned bad, and people were sick and tired of war. They were sick and tired of even sending the army down to the South and so forth. And even in the North, they voted for a lot of Democrats, and the Democrats took over the House, and he couldn't send the army down there any further. Even the governor of Mississippi, who was a Republican, asked Grant, send the army down here. You know, the Klan is coming back. We're having difficulty fighting them. And he couldn't because he didn't have the support of the House of Representatives. How much you want to bet Angela Davis is a Democrat? How much you want to bet the vast majority of these critical race theory proponents and authors and professors are Democrats that vote for the Democrat Party whose name, that name of which is never attacked as monuments are pulled down and all the rest? How much you want to bet? But this nation was not founded in slavery. If the nation was founded in slavery, why did we have a civil war? Why were the vast majority of slaves in the South, with about 5% of them in the North? Why is that? Because we weren't founded on slavery, that's why. And every serious, credible, and I might say famous historian has disputed her position. Many historians have gotten Pulitzer prizes for their books. But it's been pushed, the 1619 Project, by the New York Times and others. And the founder of the 1619 Project isn't even a historian. Go ahead.
Attempts are being barred according to the proponents of removing, quote, critical race theory from the schools.
I'm truly perplexed. Did she not say 3, 4, 5 minutes into this that critical race theory is not taught in high school? Did she just now say that people teaching critical race theory in the school are being bombarded? She did not say that, Mr. Producer? That's why I love the debate, and particularly the left, because they're completely irrational. Go ahead.
But let's not be misled by the term they are using. What we are witnessing are efforts on the part of the forces of white supremacy to regain a control which they more or less had in the past.
I don't know what that means. White supremacy to gain control of the forces they had in the past. Does that mean all white people are Klansmen? Does that mean all white people are neo-Nazis? What does it mean? They don't even know what it means. If she were pressed, why don't you define white supremacy for us? She might have some difficulty, I think, in explaining it. I think she'd have some difficulty in explaining what critical race theory is. But we saw how pernicious this is when 5 black police officers killed a black suspect. It wasn't even a suspect, just beat him to death. In Memphis, Tennessee, less than a month ago, I guess. And how some of the more radical elements in our culture, including in the media, were trying to argue that that was due to white supremacy. And you go, what? What are you talking about? Oh, yes, don't you understand? The mentality of oppress and oppressor, the mentality of systemic racism in the police force, That is an ideology that is repeated and used in training for police officers. So even black officers cannot escape this white supremacy in this white dominant society, in this systemic white racism. They unfortunately, unbeknownst to them, become part of it. That was the argument. So in other words, it's always a problem with whiteness, regardless of what's going on, period. Does that make sense to anybody? No. But this is the kind of propaganda that's out there. And they create this ideology where you can't escape it. It's circular, but you can't escape. You have a white dominant society. If something goes wrong, it's due to white privilege. But wait a minute, a black person, doesn't matter. That black person has succumbed to the white dominant privilege and ideology. Oh, I get it. You heard it lately with Nikki Haley. You had this contributor to the New York Times, his last name is Ali. He was saying the fact that Nikki Haley, a brown person, was brown. Too bad. In fact, worse. She's turned her back on people of color, on brown people. She's now part of the white dominant society. She says things that demonstrate she's part of the white dominant society. So basically what this is Marxism, dressed up as racism. And what Marxism has to do with this is quite simple. It requires conformity. It requires a war on the individual. I might be black, but I believe this. I might be what? No. That's not the way it works. It's a war on free speech. You can see the changing of the language, what you can or cannot say, how you can say it. You're seeing the re-segregation of America. That's what critical race theory is all about. That's what Marxism more broadly is all about. We're at each other's throats. They want race wars. They want economic hardship and impoverishment. They want open borders to destroy assimilation in an American culture. This is what they want. They want mayhem, they want anarchy, they want power, they want control. And in order to do that, you have to destroy the status quo.
Want to see more Mark Levin? Go to levintv.com and subscribe now.